Scott, I think I hear one of your many kids.
Yeah, probably so. Let me close the door. I got like 15.
Yeah.
The beauty and curse from working from home.
No doubt. You probably hear the fan I got in the background. I'm in my shop, garage, whatever you want to call it, and there is not a mini split of AC in here yet. So I got a big fan sucking cooler air from the house. It's extremely humid and hot here, so I wouldn't say it's that hot, like total temperature, but dude, the dew point and the humidity is off the chart. I mean, just unbelievable.
That sucks.
Not a good time, but thankfully, you know, I don't have any mechanical repair to do. I got a programming job to go do tomorrow on I think it's a 6T45 reman unit, so should be pretty straightforward, but at least that's not manual labor. And then I'm going to see Fonzlo down at his shop, so.
Nice. Yeah, I've got, I'm going to look at what am I going to look at? 2014 Chevy Express van.
Oh, for mobile stuff?
Yeah, keeps losing spark after a few minutes, but I think they've thrown enough parts at it that
they're ready to pay someone to look at it.
Yeah, he said, all right, so who can come? I put him off for a week and a half because this happened 2 weeks ago, and I was like, it's gonna be a little bit, and he reached out. He's like, can you still come? I was like, all right.
They're probably not getting it fixed without help, if we're being real here.
I mean, I already think I know what it is, but just I'll go make some money, I guess.
Amen. Good to keep your brain active, right?
That's right. That's really what I want out of it.
All right, we are dead on the money here, so we're going to get started. I'm not sure how many people will join, if people will pop in and out. You know, I know it's tough for some people due to the timing because it's a lunch hour type of thing, so we may have more people on the second one that's just literally going to start back to back. So we're not going to do an overwhelming number of slides. And, you know, I just like to share, you know, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that I'm a subject matter expert on this whatsoever. I just wanted to share this because I think this is something that is worth exploration because there's a lot of change happening on this front. And there does seem to be a lot of potential to assist and augment our activities in this field, regardless of which area of the operation that we're touching as automotive professionals, whether that's front shop, back shop, you know, diagnostics, repair, you name it. There's definitely some significant opportunity for the tools, even as they are right now, maybe to start helping you. There's definitely some on the horizon, some of which I have not had an opportunity to play with directly yet, and others that, you know, there's some integration coming with some scan tools and things of that nature. Hard to say what those are going to bring. I have my opinions, but I definitely want to make this an open forum, very much similar the way that we do with our roundtables that we do. So we've got a chat, and everybody is more than allowed to share in the chat if they have thoughts. I'm going to watch the chat, so I'm very interested to see what your thoughts are as we go through this discussion. And I will ask questions, and I'd like to hear your responses. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we're doing 2 webinars back to back. It's just going to be 60 minutes. Each one of them is probably going to feel similar and somewhat be driven a little bit depending on what our audience wants, right? So I understand that each person's going to have a little bit different interests in terms of what maybe we would like to try with the different AIs and what we would like to, yep, and the chat's working. So good job, Bobby. Thanks for testing. I know last time I had a webinar, I had issues with people being able to send messages. So that kind of made a problem. But we're going to explore 3 different AI programs specifically. We've got another one that I'll make you aware of that doesn't really have the ability to directly test or show it right here. And of course, this is just scratching the surface. There's many, many more. Now, one of the 3 that I'm going to actually walk you through and show some examples is specifically it's geared for automotive. So it's meant to specifically pull automotive specific knowledge. and it's supposed to be geared towards helping people in a shop environment. It's a very early build, so I would say it's probably far from what it will be at the end of the road. And I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are about it, where it is today. And I think you'll find it kind of eye-opening, just the variability in the performance of each of these AIs. I've also got one of the three is the Rabbit R1, which is actually a physical hardware device, which also has AI functionality. Now, it also has a SIM card slot on it. So if you do want to make this dedicated to its own internet channel, so to speak, you can do that with this device. You'll see me saying some prompts specifically to the device, and then I will show you in the portal the answer the device provides. So there is a way to do that. We're going to discuss just some different utility in the different apps. What do we think could potentially bring value to the table? If you guys have a specific prompt you want to try with each of the three AIs, we will definitely do that. I very much want to do it as let's make it participatory and you guys can drive the bus to an extent. I have pre-set up some prompts for the different AIs just to be able to essentially try to ensure consistency, because I think it's only fair to compare apples to apples if you give the AIs each the exact same prompt and ask them for the information in the same fashion, right? Otherwise, if you don't do that, it's not necessarily reasonable to expect that the results are going to be comparable and or that it's a real fair comparison to what it can do. I do expect that we're going to try to do some open discussion. So I want to know from you guys, what do you see the opportunities for AI before we go in and test them, and before we go in and see what they can do today? I want to hear what you see as an opportunity for what they can augment or improve in your workflow specifically, whether it's front shop, back shop, repair, diagnostics. What do you envision the AI maybe being able to assist you with? Go ahead, put some comments in the chat. I've got some opinions, but I want to hear your opinions too. Okay, nobody wants to take a leap of faith. That's okay. So I see a lot of different opportunities. Some of this is really going to be dependent on what these different technologies can do, how they're built, and where they evolve. I've had a conversation with one of the three companies. Okay, so James got something. Augmenting multiple sources of data centering around a single vehicle instance. Yes, I agree. I think that's certainly a good opportunity. I envision, at least from my standpoint, what I see the utility is a couple of different areas, right? So I think from a shop operations perspective, I know that if I was sitting in a vehicle and I knew that I was going to be likely performing a specific repair, if I could take out something like this device and say, go into all data, Mitchell, Identifix, find me the repair information for replacing this given component and send it to me in a PDF to my email. Okay, now I can continue what I'm doing and boom, I can get that information sent to me. I don't have to go look for it. And if the AI can be tuned into a more precise and effective search engine, if you will, I think that's something that could be tremendous. Okay, so we got some more comments. Guiding technicians and students through finite tasks and procedures. Yes, some level of hand-holding I think would be very helpful. I think that there's a lot of people struggle with that, maybe structure and process, and certainly building an AI that can do that, sort of like babysitting, if you will. Not meant to be, mean or whatever, but I do think there could be some opportunity there for sure. Absolutely. Bobby says, hunting down specific service info that may be difficult to find due to poor organization of service info. Yes. And that's a great one also, because if you're not familiar, I worked for Identifix for 6 years, and there is a lot of nuance to the way the service information is structured for each vehicle manufacturer. They use different terminology to refer to the same basic components. They put it in a different place in their manual. Now, if this is not meant to spiral necessarily into a discussion of service information per se, but it's impossible not to dissect this just a little bit while we're talking about it. If you have been into at least the three major information providers in the US and Canada, AllData, Mitchell, and Identifix, the way that they lay out the service information is quite different. AllData tries to funnel everything through a standardized format. Now, that has benefits and drawbacks, right? The benefit being is for most people, if it's a click-through interface, it's designed to be a little bit more straightforward and easier to navigate. The drawback is that there's a lot of information that does not necessarily get located by their search engine correctly, and or it's more difficult to pick off what may be missing from the manual. And in many cases, aftermarket service information is full of holes. There is a tremendous volume of information that is not in the aftermarket portals that is, in fact, in the factory service information website. So I see that as a tremendous value if there is an opportunity there for the AI to be able to parse that information more effectively, search more intelligently, and pull up better and more comprehensive results. Essentially, like if you think about Google is really good, right? Their search engine is tremendous. If you type in literally 4 or 5 words, you can almost always get what you're looking for. It is razor sharp and just unbelievable in most respects, right? Usually within the top 10 results, you get what you're looking for. When you go into the search engines in each of the service information providers, the aftermarket service information providers, it does tend to be pretty limited as far as how effective the service or the search engines are. So I see that as maybe something that the service information providers could adopt a AI of sorts to help search. And there is one company that has something like that. Oh, that's good question. So copyright could be an issue with some of that information. Agreed. Now, that's where that's one interesting thought that comes in. So one of the devices, the Rabbit, is discussing the possibility of making it so you could give the Rabbit your login to a given portal website, and then you could say, go to blank, log in, retrieve information. So it would have essentially the ability to get into the site and search that specific site using your credentials, which obviously you pay for access to. So it's not there yet. I see that as a pretty tremendous advantage. Obviously, ChatGPT is not really geared for automotive specifically. However, it is, I will show you some examples. We'll go through some of the prompts and we can kind of explore what is capable of right now. And then Carvis, which is the other one that we have full functionality of testing that we can show. That one I think is meant to go in a direction where they will try to integrate service information. I know their company is exploring data licensing for service information. And my initial talk with them was, hey, you guys should license all the factory service information. Your portal will be more effective than any of the 3 major data information providers if you license all that content and you use your AI as a search engine to parse that data and provide that, and you simply charge users the same way you would a service information resource. They pay licensing fees and the users pay a fee to have access to those. I said, look, if you can do that, that would essentially be better than all the existing ones, right? At least my opinion, right? Okay, so Mike says, I've been experimenting with Perplexity, which shows sources. Okay, that's cool. Pulling torque specs and fluid capacities, lots of errors, but it does give references so you can decide if the information is accurate and applicable. That's amazing, right? Because that's one thing we have to ask ourselves, and you'll see this as we go through the kind of the tests. We don't know where the information's coming from. We don't know what the AI has access to, which sources it has functional access to, and which sources it does not. Now, I think there's legal restrictions in the US that the AIs are not permitted to touch all elements of the internet and things of that nature. It's not allowed unfettered access to everything, right? On the other hand, ChatGPT, you do have the ability with the premium to upload specific documents. So you can give the AI direct input information and then ask it questions in response. And we'll show you a demo of that specifically. Okay, so if the AI is, James says, if the AI is connected to the net, copyright is an issue. Both questions and answers are assimilated into the AI learning repository. That's very true, right? Because some of this data could be proprietary or a knowledge base that is not for public consumption without licensing fees and things of that nature. So closed system AIs are probably going to be more common, And that's one of the reasons why I spoke with Carvis, the one AI company, about going to the OEMs, licensing the data, and then having access to all of that. Because if you could feed an AI every piece of service information published from every vehicle manufacturer, the razor sharp speed of which you could get answers and accurate answers, also you'd be basing it off known information that we generally trust, that would be outstanding, right? So that's, for me, probably where I think the most value lies for us. Now, they've also talked about, with Carvis, the possibility of training it or giving it access to things like parts catalogs. So if you're a technician and you say, hey, I've written up my work order and it needs the following repairs. Now you say, hey, Carvis, I want you to go build an estimate of repairing these components and source the parts using these brands. And you could probably pre-program some settings like, hey, if it's a Volkswagen, I want to use Bosch parts whenever available, or I want to use dealer parts, right? So if there's a way that they can integrate that and bring those together into one area, it could obviously improve the efficiency quite a bit. Because you think about the dynamics of shops and some of the challenges that we face with regards to, the front shop personnel have a hard challenge dealing with consumers and explaining to them what's happening with the car and being able to kind of hold their hand and be patient. And, a lot of it is an exercise in patience more than anything, but also diplomacy and just having good language skills and whatnot. They also spend a lot of time with customer retention and customer care. And if the work order system was easier and more consistently built through a high quality AI where it can source it, where it can build the base labor, then you could have someone like a shop foreman look through it after it's built as a baseline level and make any modifications necessary, which probably takes 5 to 10 minutes maximum, versus, hey, I got to go build this whole work order and I got to source all the parts and et cetera, et cetera. If you could have an AI do the baseline stuff, get it set up and feed it to you, and then all you'd have to do is review and edit. Huge time saver, right? So there's some huge possibilities on that front. Now, here's some just additional questions before we launch into our demonstration here. Do you think that the AI can replace the skills of a human being? And I'm not talking about the physical skills, like I can remove and replace a component, but the critical thinking, the logic, the decision making. Do we think that the AI can actually fully replace human beings? I don't believe it can at this point. I think maybe in the future, there may be more of a concern around this. And some of that is, surrounding what kind of information we feed it. Now, one of the things I found most fascinating, and you'll see this when we go through our demos here, there's been some implication by some of these companies that are trying to make vehicle specific or our field specific AIs. Many of the people building these interfaces believe that they can essentially water down diagnostics to something that an AI will essentially perform or do for us. Now, I laugh just a little bit because the information that they are generally inputting into the AIs is nothing more than factory service information. And a seasoned, well-trained automotive diagnostic mind knows that factory service information in the vast majority of cases is utter garbage with regards to diagnostics, right? Like there are maybe pieces that may be helpful, like a description in operation. There might be a fault finding trouble tree type of thing that maybe contains some specifications like a resistance measurement or a specification for clearance, right? Those kind of things, for sure. It could maybe essentially build a trouble tree in the fact, you think about like if you've ever used any guided fault finding on a German car, BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, the fault finding that exists on this factory scan tools for those in many respects is basically like an interview, right? It asks you, is the resistance above or below the measured or the recommended specification? Is this or this true? And then it basically takes you through. So I see an AI maybe being able to provide more of that, but is that foolproof? No. And is that something where if the sources of information are only derived from factory service information or other similar sources, there's virtually a 0% chance that these things will be really any better than what we currently have at our fingertips, except we'll be able to find the information faster. So I think there's some huge limitations still built in depending on how they are developed further. Now, if they got together a workshop of 10 different technicians, and they literally went through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of diagnostic scenarios, and they came to a consensus on here's the testing that should be done, and they walked through it and they gave predictive values. Okay, I think you could build an AI more like that. Now, that also means that the people on the other end of the AI who are using it day to day have to understand that information and be able to competently perform the tests in order to provide the accurate data. So there's always some level of human judgment involved in the process, which could be an impediment to the AI really proving valuable in certain situations. So lots of limitations I see. Now, if you have other ideas or thoughts about that, again, please type them in the chat. I'd like to hear it. I think everyone here is interested in that dialogue for sure. Now, efficiency-wise, like we talked about, I think there's some huge opportunity there for sure. The other question that we have is the judgment. Can we trust the AI's answers? And like Mike said, at least the one he's been experimenting with is citing its sources, right? Now, I did notice when I was testing out these other AIs, some of them will cite their sources. Now, I do really like the idea that ChatGPT Premium allows you to upload a specific document. So if you have a training document in a PDF format that is concrete in nature and specific, and you can feed that information to it and then ask it a question in the context of that document specifically, then you can feel much more comfortable that the AI is able to assimilate that data and potentially make a judgment relative to the source material you have provided. So in other words, you can teach it something or give it information and ask it to help you with the judgment aspect of things. I think that's pretty useful. And again, we'll show you in the demo here, see what you think. I do have some concerns about watering down our intellect. I already can tell you that I have witnessed with my own two eyes some people in our field that have been using this for purposes that I would deem less than ethical. People that have been using this to write classes instead of actually doing the research and learning the material themselves. That's deeply concerning because again, like we asked before, where's the source coming from, right? So if we're not vetting the content that's being spit back out and we're just disseminating it to the masses and saying, hey, this is how this works. Do you really know? So it's not a substitute for doing your work. It's not a substitute for doing your research. And it is absolutely not ethical to use it as a replacement for effort, research, or things of that nature. And until the AI is knowing everything, access to everything, which unlikely as that may be, potentially due to human fears, but not necessarily unfounded, I don't think you can ever get to the point where you're going to say, hey, I can just take this and run, right? So it's definitely, there has to be some food for thought about how we use it and some true ethical reflection on, is this an acceptable way to use this or not? So again, I'm not a subject matter expert. Most of this is just my opinion. And if you have a different opinion, I'd be interested in hearing it. So now we're going to switch over here. And the first thing I'm going to do actually is pull up my Google Documents so I can show you the prompts that I made. All right. AI prompts. Okie dokie. So we are going to share this tab. So here are the prompts that I have constructed. Bobby, I left your note in there. That's a good suggestion. We'll leave that in there anyway. It was a good suggestion. So here's some prompts that I wrote. I'm going to take each of these prompts and stick them into each of the AIs, and we're going to see what kind of results we get. I think this is going to be just kind of interesting. We probably won't have time to go through every one of these. If you happen to have something you want to write as a prompt, feel free. Stick it in the chat, and I'll stick it into each of the AIs, and we'll see what happens. So if you come up with a specific one you want to try. So we're going to take the first one, the 2020 Ford Escape, and you'll see the reason I have it written out like this is because the Rabbit AI only works with speech. So I have to physically talk to it, and I have to be careful that I say it exactly the same way as I'm giving it to the other two AIs because we want to ensure we have consistent results. So I'll do the Rabbit AI first. Now, the Rabbit AI has a beta version and a regular version. I'm going to do the beta version because the beta version is better. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that. Beta Rabbit. Whoop, the ears aren't up. You'll see there's a little ears on here, and that's when it's listening is when you press the button. Whoops. Now watch, I'm going to have a glitch. Back to home. Beta Rabbit. I have a 2020 Ford Escape 1.5-liter engine with four-wheel drive. I would like detailed written instructions for replacement of the driver's front wheel bearing. Now it's going to do its little work. So it's going to basically take that information and go construct a recommended service path. So what I'm actually going to do, and you'll see this here, once it's done with its thinking, we are going to actually go over here. And in this portal, the Rabbit keeps track and logs the responses for what specifically we have asked it. Let's see if it shows up here. So today is the 31st, so it's still thinking. We'll give it a second here. I asked it this specific information before, so we have some various stuff. Oh, I don't know if it lost connection to the internet or what it's doing. It's taking a very long time. Oh, there we go. All right, so I'll reload. All right, there we go. So here's the detailed instructions that it spit out specifically here. So let's scroll through and kind of take a look. Okay, so it's telling us here's some different, some parts, some potential tools that we may need to do this job. You can see it's a little bit DIY geared since we're talking about jacks and jack stands. Preparation, lifting the vehicle, tells us we have to remove the brake caliper and rotor, removing the axle nut, disconnecting the ball joint. All of these ring pretty true, right? I would say this seems to be fairly accurate. Now, it is telling us that this is a press-out bearing. We're going to go look that up and find out if that's actually true, right? Because we don't know. Could be a bolt-on bearing, could be a press-out bearing. Now, I'm not super familiar with this particular vehicle, 2020, so I don't know if it's a press-out or if it's a bolt-on. I bet someone in here probably has done one and knows the answer. I don't. But essentially, it gives us some basic directions. Now, these, again, seem to be relatively generic. Now, look at it. Also says there's 2 videos that it found, and we can click these if we want to watch those. And you can see, I don't know if you can see in the bottom left, there is a URL, and these are both pulled from YouTube. So it does pull some source material. Now, we've checked that one. So we're going to go to Carvis, and we are going to give it the same prompt. So I'm going to switch to this tab. I'm going to sign in. Okay, continue with Google. All right, so we're going to stick, whoops, not Audi. We're going to, okay, now you're glitching. All right, hold on. Reload. If you guys can see this good here. Yep, okay. Watch now, their AI is going to break, right? So we're going to go down here and we're going to select Ford. We're going to say it is an Escape. Whoop, come on now. And we're going to say it's a 2020. And we'll just make up a number here. It does make you input this, which I have no idea why. And last service, we'll just say 07 2024. Say we're doing it now. Okay, so now it's given this information, and we're just going to paste that prompt. This prompt is identical to what I read to the Rabbit AI. And we're going to give it a little bit of time, and we're going to see what it comes up with. Now, I'm laughing just a little bit because so far this looks virtually identical to what the Rabbit AI told us. Now, the other thing that I find interesting is this one actually has even more generic instruction. This one does not make any mention of whether or not this is a press-out bearing or a bolt-on. Look what it says here. You may need to use a hammer to tap it out. Clearly, this AI has never worked in a Rust Belt area. No mention of a torch, no mention of a press. But again, we don't know how accurate this is. Now look at it finds several videos on YouTube but we have no idea whether these videos are worth a darn or not. And that is inherently a limitation. Now, this one looks pretty close as far as applicability, but we know that there is a pretty big limitation as far as the accuracy of information that's on YouTube. So again, like we talked about before, there's not necessarily any qualification or vetting of the information. So let's go over to ChatGPT now. And I have ChatGPT Premium, which is $20 a month. We're going to give it the same exact prompt. We're going to see what it comes up with. Okay, the basic list of what's required looks pretty similar, right? All right, we're going to scroll down here to read through. Oh, this is funny. This one's talking about a dust cap from the center of the hub. That sounds maybe a bit unlikely on a 2020. So this one is saying unbolting the hub assembly. So one of them said we had to press it out. One of them said we were unbolting, and one of them said to hit it with a hammer. Well, we're going to go look at the service information and find out what it actually is. Is it a bolt-on or is it a press-out? So the directions are fairly similar and generic. Now, this one does not give us any videos. It does not recommend any other steps. But it does seem to be a relatively comprehensive set of instructions, but very similar to the other two AIs. Now, the thing about that I find kind of fascinating is the Carvis AI is supposed to be an automotive specific one. And yet, it didn't really give us a better answer than the Rabbit or ChatGPT. The only thing it really did any differently, well, and it wasn't really different because the Rabbit gave it to us too, was find those two videos. The response was very similar to what we got specifically from the Rabbit. Almost identical, right? And we put in a bunch of vehicle-specific information, but that didn't really seem to generate better traction as far as what response we got. So let's go to all data and find out what, in fact, the directions are for replacing this particular wheel bearing. All right, so we're in all data, and I've probably selected this vehicle before because I did test these prompts just for exploration. Okay, so let's go wheel bearing and search. All right, so wheel bearing and hub. Oh, that's rear. There's front. It doesn't look like it filters based off of front wheel or all wheel. All right. Well, this certainly looks like it. Oh, yep, it's a press out. Look at that. So it is, in fact, a press out bearing. Now, I've already forgotten which one of them said was a press out bearing. Well, Parvis told us to hit it with a hammer. Actually, the Rabbit AI was the one that said that this was likely a press out bearing. So kudos to the one that is actually not an automotive specific AI, right? Kind of remarkable if you ask me. So let's go and we're going to look at the prompts again and we'll test a different one. And we'll take a little vote here for which one we should do next. Which one do you guys want to try next? You tell me which one is interesting to you. Or if you have another prompt you want to try.
While people are throwing some ideas in there, I spent quite a bit of time this past weekend talking to my brother-in-law, and so he owns a software development company.
Cool.
So I was talking to him about some coding stuff, and he said there's almost no point in learning it anymore. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, everything is going to prompting. He said, and so we started talking about AI, and I shared the Rabbit with him, which he knew about. And he's like, I've tested multiple different AIs that are available, and he said I've tested them like exhaustively. He said the key really comes down to it's not going to be for the faint of heart. If you're like, oh, you want it to do everything for you, it's not going to do everything for you because it only has available to you what it's learned from humans, right? What we've entered into it or allowed it to have access to. So one of the things that he said he's noticed that it's picked up is laziness. if you ask it to do something, it may say, I can't do that, or I don't have the resources. He said, continue to challenge it. He said, and it'll usually come through. He said, but you have to be willing to like almost embed it into your life. Like you ask it things that you already know answers to and everyday things constantly, so that you start to understand how to ask questions to get what you want out of it.
Oh, it's just like a search engine, right? Same idea.
Yeah.
Because once you learn how to ask Google the right way to find something you're looking for, it's pretty good at finding it. It just sometimes it's the key of which words do you include, which words do you not include, right? It's very much that.
Yeah, and I think it's also a lot to do with, like, you know, if you use Google a lot, if you learn to use Google Dorks are you familiar with those?
No, I don't. That's not one I'm familiar with.
So Google Dorks is just, and I don't know where the name came from, but it's basically some.
Yeah, right. That's pretty funny.
Typically, like single word coding, you can add to your search to change the outcome. You can do like INURL, colon, and then what you want, but you have to put a URL in there, and it'll only search inside of that URL.
Yes, I have heard of that. So I've seen augmentation of when you're in the search box, there are specific things you can do where you can put like site and then a colon and then give the site and then what you want to search on that specific site. So it can do a tactical parsing of data on one individual site. Yeah. So yeah, that's awesome.
There's a whole list of those that you can use, but I think it's very similar to this. You have to look at it and start to learn how to get it to do what you want it to do. And if it's like, oh, well, you know, go here and do this. Well, I don't know how to do that. Show me how to do that. Tell me how to do that. And if you keep working it, you'll get a lot better responses, he said.
Agreed. I found that to be the case. And we'll show you with one of these prompts. We're going to do the Silverado Diag one. That's the first vote we've had. So we're going to try that one. And then I also want to show you specifically with ChatGPT on the Volkswagen one, where I can upload a specific document or documents to get better responses. I just want to illustrate. That's one I want to do 100% for sure. But let's do the Silverado one. So I'm going to take the Silverado one. I'm going to do the rabbit. So I'm just going to highlight this so I read it correctly. Beta rabbit. I have a 2020 Chevrolet Silverado 1500 5.3 liter engine with four-wheel drive. I have a fault code of P06DD in the engine control module. What troubleshooting steps are recommended based off of all available resources? All right, so it's going to take it a minute to find that. I did do this one to the Beta Rabbit as well, just for a test. While we're waiting for it, I will go ahead and dump that test into the Carvis AI so that we can get two cooking at once. And I could have done these, you know, preemptively only and left them, but I felt that it was better to do most of this live so that you could truly see what it's doing. All right, so one. While the rabbit is doing its thinking, we will. All right, so we're going to paste the prompt in exactly as we read it to the rabbit. And then I will switch over to the rabbit here, and I will show you what it came up with for that fault code. Okay, so we're back over on the rabbit, and we are going to select the answer, and here's what we got. All right, so it says, okay, it says the fault code is related to engine oil pressure control. It says, here's what we should do. Make sure oil level is correct. Okay, that would make sense. Verify the quality. Yep, that would make sense. Inspect oil filter. Okay, so they're saying an incorrect oil filter could cause oil pressure issues. All right. Replace oil filter if it's clogged or damaged, or incorrect, it should say also, right? Oil pressure sensor. Faulty oil pressure sensor can cause incorrect readings and trigger this code. Test the sensor and replace as necessary. Check the oil pump. Inspect the oil pressure control solenoid valve. Okay, so it at least gives us the idea that there is, in fact, a potential control circuit setup as well as a sensor for the feedback monitoring, right? Also says we should be aware of checking wiring and maybe perhaps clear the fault code and retest. And then it gives us some possible resources on this. And of course, always reminds us to go see a professional mechanic if it doesn't work. So now let's go take a look at the Carvis AI and see what it came up with. What the hell? Oh, that's weird. I hit the share tab button and all of a sudden it disappeared. All right, so we're going to prompt it again. It doesn't take long. But we'll see. Remember, Carvis is supposed to be more of an automotive specific AI. So let's see if we feel that the answer that it gives us is better or worse. I already have opinions because I've tested these, but I'm curious to see what you guys think here. So first it tells us to use an OBD2 scanner. I'm not a fan of that. I would really prefer to use like more specific terms like an automotive diagnostic scan tool, because if you asked a code for a body control module, which I have tested, it tells you the same thing. And OBD2 is only specific to engine control. Okay, so check the oil level and condition, inspect the oil pressure sensor. Oh, there's a video. Let's scroll up a little bit here. Couple of videos. Use a multimeter to check the sensor's voltage. Okay, checking oil pressure with a gauge. Okay. Okay. Tells you to see a professional mechanic if the pump needs to be replaced. This time it does give us a source, so that's something. And then it tells us to use a hilarious OBD dongle. So I don't know why it would do this, if this is like basically fishing for something along the lines of sponsored content, or what the rationale is there. You can see it's also recommending a specific motor oil, which, again, no idea why. It should be recommending Dexos. That's probably a Dexos 2 spec. I haven't looked. But instead of giving us the factory spec, it's making some kind of branded recommendation. So I guess I have a problem with that. And then it looks like it pulled a couple of YouTube videos. I don't know if the YouTube videos were also retrieved by the Rabbit. It gave us some links and we didn't click them, but it's possible that it did. So let's go over to ChatGPT and see if this is better. So when you go to ChatGPT, you just click up on the top left on ChatGPT to start a new one. And I'm just going to paste the prompt and ask it. Oh, it's interesting. One seems to think that there's even some specific specifications for the solenoid valve for control for high and low pressure. Now, I don't know. I haven't looked in service information yet, so we'll go take a look in all data and see how this matches up. Now, this one I feel like is maybe a little bit. Now, again, here's the hilarious OBD2 scanner. Clear the code, see if it reappears. Okay, we're just trying to confirm the fault there, so that's relatively reasonable. Oil level and quality again. Oil pressure, solenoid control valve. Okay. Engine oil pressure. Software updates. But they don't mention checking the oil pressure sensor, do they? That's interesting. So they're not suggesting that this is likely to be anything related to sensing. That's interesting. Yeah, I find that really interesting. So that makes us ask the question, does this actually have a sensor, or is this an inferred value? Let's go find out. So we're going to go into all data. And again, I don't know. I am not familiar with this exact vehicle. I have not pre-researched to find out the answer. I want this to be an organic blind exploration, right? I probably already looked it up though, just the vehicle. Where are you? Maybe not. I guess I didn't. All right. Silverado. Silverado 1500 four-wheel drive, 5.3. And we're going to search P06 David. Search. Look at that. There is your general trouble tree right there. P06DD. Engine oil pressure control solenoid valve performance. So here are your possibilities here. Signal performance over here under control. Output circuit is switched to ground to activate the component. So there must be a measurement of oil pressure taking place. So that's interesting. One of the AIs failed to mention if there was actually a sensor. And I would argue that the other ones were fairly generic in nature. Now, let's see. There appeared to be some possible TSBs. So let's see what happens here. Harness chafing, etc., etc. We'll try a Google search. I feel like there was a bulletin on this. PM, P06, PD, PSP, PDF. Boom. There it is. And let's look at the applicant. Whoops, that was not what we're trying to do there. So it looks like oh, not emojis. Look at that. The date cutoff. So this is a date cutoff. So technically this one would not apply. So maybe we should have picked a 2019, right? So let's go back to ChatGPT and let's ask it if there are any TSBs. Are there any TSBs or PITs or P06 PD that apply? All right. So if you ask it a direct question, it appears that it is capable of finding some potential bulletins. So should we see if any of these are technically applicable? We'll do a Google search for that. Okay, here's that one. That one does apply, it looks like. Oh, no. Nope, that's the diesel. It's the right year, but it's a diesel, so that does not apply. All right, let's go back and we'll try this one. Okay, there's a PIP there. See if this one. No, 19 to 21, but 2.7. So that does not apply either. Let's try the last one. Do the search. There's a tab. And there it is. Nope. Again, does not apply. Oh, no, wait. Nope, it does. I'm a dummy. But that, oh, no, only 19 again. So it looks like, well, that's really interesting. Look at that. It says the Sierra 19 to 20, all engines, but it says the Silverado, not the 1500. Interesting, all engines. So this one might apply. So it's interesting that this was not called out or mentioned by the AIs with respect to anything. But if we ask it a direct question, is there any applicable TSB? It seems to be capable of finding the information that we're looking for, or at least entertaining that there is in fact a possible solution to this based on technical service bulletins. So I do think that's pretty interesting. So let's go back to our prompts. Now, you guys have any other questions you want to ask it in the context of this specific case, or do we want to try another prompt and see what we get? Let's do the Volkswagen one. I want to show you what it can do when you feed it specific information. All right, so we're going to go here. So first, we're going to do this. We're going to ask each of the three AIs about this specific fault code, and we're going to see what it gives us. Then we're going to feed ChatGPT specific documents that happen to exist on this issue, and we'll see what it says revised based off the information we provide to it. We're going to start with the Rabbit AI. Make it up here. Beta Rabbit. I have a 2016 Volkswagen Golf 2.0 turbocharged engine. I have a fault code of P2004 stored in the engine control module. What troubleshooting steps are recommended based off all available resources? We'll let it here expand. We'll take our prompt, we will copy it, and we will go over to the Carvis AI while it is doing that. And we said this was a VW, so we'll go all the way down. And this is a Golf. And it is 2016. We'll just say 100,000. And we'll say this month. Okay. And boom. But I love how it's using Ford terminology, IMRC. Well, at least this one tells us you should have a repair manual for the vehicle. I feel like this particular AI, at least how it exists right now, appears to be heavily DIY oriented. The terminology it's using and the way that it's making product recommendations, like, okay, it's telling us to use a specific one here, it's telling us to use a specific one here, and this is definitely not what most automotive professionals would own. Usually it's a Model 87 or an 88 that people have, not a 117. I've never even heard of that one. It even tells us the wrong manual. It's a 2016 and it tells us the wrong manual in addition to that. Oh, Lord. Yeah, so I see a lot of issues with this one. What it's telling us for steps. Okay, so it says vacuum lines, electrical connections, checking resistance. So, I mean, in many respects, it just kind of feels like a super lazy fault trouble tree that you might get out of a really poor service manual. Let's see what the Rabbit had to say. I'll refresh the page here and we'll pull it up. Here's the Rabbit. All right, so here's what the Rabbit said. Common causes. Solenoid may be defective and not functioning properly. Wiring issues, okay. Faulty map sensor, okay, maybe. Faulty intake, we'd have to know how it monitors and determines whether it moved or not. Faulty intake manifold runner position sensor. Well, if it has a sensor, we don't know. Check the actuator solenoid. Damage or wear, okay. Wiring connectors. Test the map sensor, okay. No help as far as how to do that test, right? So there's where we ask ourselves, is this really going to help someone who doesn't have the appropriate knowledge? Well, how do I test a map sensor? What am I looking for? And maybe we could follow this up and ask it that, right? Inspect the sensor for damage or wear, okay? Inspect the flaps, okay? That makes sense. Check if they're stuck in the open position. Perform a visual inspection. Clear the code and test drive, okay? No citing of any videos or anything on this one. All right. So nothing super great there from either of those two, I would say. That's not really adding any value to the conversation for that vehicle. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Okay. So it at least tells us that the code is a little bit more specific, right? It's saying that this usually means that it's stuck open. The flap is stuck open. Okay. So I would say these directions appear to be fairly similar, maybe a little bit more detailed, right? So there is mention of a software update potentially. Blah, 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 service manual. So let's try. I've got a couple of documents about this. There's a bulletin. And let's see here. So this is a bulletin, and this is a self-study program. We're going to upload these two. You can see they're uploading. Please revise the test plan based on these documents to be more specific and detailed. And let's see what it thinks.
And how large are those? Or not really, not how large. How many pages are those? Do you know offhand?
One's like 10 or 12, and the other one's probably like 25.
Okay. I know they had a limitation for a while, but a lot of things have changed recently. So
yes.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Well, it's definitely pulling some information specifically out of the information we gave it, because it's making mention of Otis, which is the factory software, and it made no mention of that before. So you can see that it uses the super generalized lingo of OBD2 scanner in virtually all situations. That seems to be a common thread from the AI. Let's see what it says here. Locate vacuum lines associated with, it's still using that same terminology, which I think is kind of hilarious. And again, that's a very generalized term. Visually inspect for debris or blockages that restrict airflow, ensure vacuum lines are not twisted, kinked, or damaged. Okay. Check operation, use measured value blocks. Okay. Well, that's helpful, right? That's a specific piece of information from the TSB. I just know this because I've already read it. Values change instantly. Okay. Yep. So it tells us, this gives us a little bit more predictive information. Of course, this is only being obtained specifically because it read the TSB we gave it and the self-study program. Blah, 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 right? Move the carrier plate. Okay, so this is literally language directly out of the TSB. So I guess, ChatGPT just basically doesn't even paraphrase it, just pirates stuff directly. Oh, man, that's funny. Inspect the wiring harness or connectors, blah, blah, multimeter. But it doesn't realize that that's not a published specification, so that's lovely, right? Okay. Well, that's pretty hilarious. It's talking about ELSA, which is a system only the dealers have access to. Now, I can tell you the repair group will still be the same if we're talking about Irwin, which is the aftermarket. So that's at least good. Faulty, yes. Replaced with OEM parts. Hey, look at that. It's telling you no aftermarket garbage, huh? Sounds like it's working a tech line, right? It's telling you to use OEM parts.
I would expect it to reference ELSA though, because we're looking at self-study programs.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah. So it's just repeating what it's read, basically.
Yeah.
I just find that amusing.
If it did its own thing and told you otherwise, I would be
more impressed.
Well, I don't know if I'd be impressed or scared, because now it knows
right. Oh dear, now it's really thinking, right?
And it's taking liberties, right? So that's when it's like, okay. It's more of nothing to notice. Be curious, right? So
let's see what we got here. Required parts and tools. Okay. Hey, look at that. Even mentioned some of the very specific tools. And bulletin. Reference documents. Well, yeah, dingus, I gave you those documents. So if we wanted to get more information about how the manifold system works, we could ask it specifically in the context of this. So once we've opened the single GPT, all the information we've uploaded to this individual instance, if you will, remains within this. So if we were to now ask it, explain to me how the variable intake manifold works on this vehicle based on the documents provided. I love how it keeps using Ford terminology, IMRC. That's so funny. Should we ask it what IMRC is just to see if it'll tell us it's Ford lingo? It probably won't, but now look at this. It is pulling out some of the information. So it identifies the control motor V157, the position sensor G336. So it's clearly pulling the information straight out of the information we fed it, which is cool, right? Like, so I look at this as maybe a quick, easy way to get faster answers rather than having to parse an entire bulletin or an entire piece of information, you can just feed it to ChatGPT and ask it some questions, right? There's a summary, and this is correct. This is right out of the self-study program. So what I envision for ChatGPT being able to do this, there are many manufacturers who have training manuals that are not integrated into the factory service information that we get through Identifix, All Data, Auto Data, etc., all that stuff. So I do think that perhaps in the future, if we have the ability to feed a specific AI training documentation that comes out of the OE site that's not found in service information sections, I envision that we might be able to feed it all of those documents and then get deeper levels of information that's not published, right? So Volkswagen has thousands of self-study programs that teach you how various components work. If we could have one instance of ChatGPT where we could basically funnel every one of those pieces of information into it and then say, hey, look, I want to know how this component works, and simply ask it, it could parse that massive mountain of data and aggregate all of the data from all the self-study programs, because they will specifically explain a given component more than one time throughout a variety of self-study programs. So that's where I envision something where you can do physical direct uploads being a huge advantage. So anyway, we're out of time for this session. I'm literally going to start back over at the beginning. If you guys want to hang out, you're welcome to. We're not even changing the meeting or anything like that. We're just going to shoot it straight through and go all the way through. So we'll see if we get some additional people joining here for our second session. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and just start all over again. So appreciate you guys coming to this session. Curious to see, if we get some more people coming to the next one. Again, I think this is a really interesting topic for exploration, and I'm very curious to see where it goes. I think it was interesting to see just the comparison between the three different AIs and the level of performance or lack thereof that each of them sometimes display. Very generic in nature in a lot of situations. So I'm just going to pause for probably like 60 seconds and drink a little more coffee, and then we'll start back over. All right, so we're going to start back over here. If you were in the first session, awesome. If you want to hang around again, even better. I am going to try different prompts on this one. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the AI gives us based on the different prompts we try. And we'll try some different ones this time just to see. I tried to write enough of them that we could spend enough time kind of experimenting and seeing what it'll do depending on what inputs we give it. So appreciate everybody who came to the second session. I know some of you stayed or were here for the first one and are just going to hang out for the second one too. Even better, that's cool. We'll try to cover some different stuff so that the folks that came to the first one can see some different presentation stuff. Just want to say, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that I am a subject matter expert on this topic in any way. I just wanted to do an exploration on this, specifically to open your eyes a little bit to the possibilities, have a discussion in an open forum regarding what might be the limitations, maybe the concerns we need to have, and also just appropriate ethical use of these resources and what we feel is good conduct when using something like this. So we'll go ahead and go to our next slide here. So we're going to compare three distinct programs. Two of these are not automotive specific. One is, however, the one that is automotive specific is at a very early stage of development. So I don't think that it accurately represents where it is headed or what it's going to be. But I do think you'll find this very interesting just to see the variability and also the fact that it's really only as good as how it's built and what specific information is given to that given knowledge source, right? The AI itself. We're going to talk a little bit about what we might use the AI for in our daily lives, in a shop, as a mobile diagnostics guy, and anything and everything in between. There's obviously some utility I think we'll find here from our exploration of this. There's also some situations where we're really going to be scratching our head about the responses we get. I like your idea, Bobby, asking the GPTs, the Chat GPT and the other two about older cars where maybe it doesn't have a bunch of resources. A good example was maybe we could ask it about Bosch Jetronic systems. That could be a really good one. I think Scott could agree on that. That's something a lot of technicians struggle with is the old Jetronic systems. Maybe we'll ask it a question about that.
That could be a good one. Books now. I know.
I was gonna say you probably have all the books. I'm pretty sure I have all the books.
Yeah.
I don't have any of them in a PDF format readily available to me for this webinar, but that's a good idea. That would have been a good one to feed ChatGPT that and then ask it Jetronic questions, right? That would have been awesome. I didn't even think of that. That would have been a good idea. But I think we'll try that. That's a good idea. I like that idea. I think we're gonna try to do some open discussion if anybody's interested in that. We did a little bit in the first session, and of course, I think that's really valuable. It's good to explore what we see for utility, what we see for value, things of that nature. Really, really good to know the limitations, right? James already found one of the Jetronic books. Well, there we go. We will probably try asking about that then, because I think that'll be interesting to see. So what kind of uses do you guys see for an AI? What could we use this for in a shop? Now, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think, for example, one of the AIs that we're going to demonstrate here is called the Rabbit R1. It's a physical hardware device, and it does have a SIM card, so you could give it physical data if you want to give it a data plan. I doubt it would use a lot of data, but I guess I don't know. I'd be real curious to see how fast it uses up your data. But the Rabbit is kind of nice just because it is a physical hardware component. What I see for future uses is highly dependent. This one may have massive potential depending on how it develops. Based on the demonstration they gave, and I'll talk a little bit about that I kind of failed to mention in the first webinar, there could be some huge value in the Rabbit specifically for automotive technicians, depending on how they develop it. The task as the technician that you could potentially streamline or improve, I see something like this, where if we could basically say, hey, I'm doing a ball joint repair, right? You're sitting in the car, you're doing your initial inspection, diagnosis. You know for sure the client is going to do the ball joint because maybe they already bought it on the ticket, or you know that they're going to authorize it. You could preemptively say, Rabbit, go find me the R&R procedure for a lower ball joint on this vehicle, and then explain the vehicle. And in the future, they've told us that supposedly this device, they would allow us to input login information for various websites, which means we could potentially link it to a service information resource like AllData, Mitchell, Identifix, Autodata, anyone or everyone. If that had the ability to log into one of our sites and retrieve information, that could be a tremendous streamlining operation for us. That would be just absolutely huge if we had that possible option, right? Now, it could also streamline things as far as aggregating service information. So if there's a test plan written somewhere, maybe it becomes a more tactical search engine within a service information resource like Identifix, AllData, or Mitchell. I've personally found that their search engines are mediocre. Sometimes they don't turn up documents that do exist if you don't put in the exact right phrase. Maybe an AI will be better at that. And certainly if the AI is capable of being allowed access, could potentially present some real improvements to our workflow. As far as the service advisor goes, I think it's possible that this could be a huge advantage for building tickets, right? So it may be we can get this information and we can say, I know the Carvis AI is talking about this, where it would be able to have access to a parts database, perhaps something like RepairLink or something along the lines of PartsLink 24, where it would be able to log in and build a ticket, where it would be able to read the service information and say, hey, when I replace the intake manifold, I have to replace injector seals, and I have to replace this, and I have to replace this. And the AI would read that, understand that, and build the ticket accordingly and put those line items on there. Now, I think that could be a tremendous time saver for both the front and the back shop staff, because potentially at that point in time, they could have something like an interface, whether it's on a tablet or it's on a dedicated interface, where they simply say, hey, I'm going to be replacing this component. Please read the service information and the parts catalog and build the ticket accordingly based on the presumption of we're going to follow all factory instructions, right? So if factory instructions say there's stretch bolts, it's going to source those. If factory instructions say that there are gaskets that got to be replaced, it's going to source those and it's going to put them on the ticket. Then, if the ticket is fully built, we can have our shop foreman or our service manager simply look the ticket over, make sure it's up to snuff, make any quick modifications to labor times and or part sourcing that need to be, and then boom. So the amount of time savings that could potentially be realized through something like that are huge. And of course, any way that we can cut down those holes in the process at a shop would obviously drastically improve workflow and possible profitability. So here's hoping that that's where this can go. I know as someone who has literally done pretty much all the jobs in a shop, I see immense utility and value in that if that's what we can make one of these AIs or many of these AIs potentially live up to. Do you see any other opportunities, diagnostics wise maybe? And we'll do some testing of the AIs so you can kind of see if there's any utility there. We did in the first session and we will again in this session. If you have a specific request as we go through this of things that you'd like to try, let me know. I'd like to try those as well, and I'd like to explore and see what they're like. So here's some questions I want you to kind of think about as we go through this. Do you think that the AI can truly replace a human being in their entirety? Do we think that this is something that could potentially take the place of another person in a shop? Is this something that's going to eliminate the need for personnel? My opinion is no. I don't think so. I think it's a workflow augmentation tool, and that's where it will likely stay. But it's something to keep in the back of your mind and something to ask yourself as we go through this. Now, do we think it can help us in efficiency, in diagnostics, repair, building tickets, or anything else? I definitely think there's huge potential there. The question that we also want to ask is, how can we trust the judgment of the AI? And this is something we need to be careful with. There's ethical ramifications of simply regurgitating what an AI tells us, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's also questions about what source material it's using to give us answers, right? Is it vetting the content? In general, the answer is no, it's not. Now, if we were to feed it a bunch of SAE white papers and then ask it technical questions and say, hey, I want you to provide an answer based off of SAE white papers, well, then we could probably trust what it's saying, right? But we don't know what resources each of these AIs are tapping to make their recommendations or judgments. So that does remind us we have to be suspect and careful, and we have to rely on our human judgment. We cannot simply say, I'm going to do whatever the AI tells me. I'm going to trust it implicitly when it makes a recommendation. And I think you'll see some of those limitations evident here in what we do. Now, I also want to point out, I have seen people in our field already start using AI unethically. There have been people who have used this in construction of automotive training classes without vetting what the AI is saying. There's people who have used it to write marketing information and done it in unethical fashion as well. It's really not a good idea to use this as something as a substitution for your own originality. And you also need to be doing your own research and citing your sources and verifying that the information that you've been provided is indeed accurate. So it's not a substitute for your intellect. You need to make sure you actually know the information. If you want to use it as a primer or as a way to filter data or parse data, there's a lot of value there. And we'll show you some examples of that. But it cannot become a substitution, and we cannot allow ourselves to atrophy mentally by simply relying on an AI. Now, again, that's all my opinion, but I think it's something to keep in the back of your mind. And I do think it is something that we want to be careful about as we go through use of these types of technologies. So let's go ahead and we'll get into some demonstrations now. If you've got any suggestions or thoughts, let me know. I'm going to switch over to the AI prompt screen. So what I did was write a number of sample prompts that we could experiment with and see what the AI gives us for responses. I wanted to try out and see how the AIs, each of the three that we're going to test, are going to respond to the exact same prompt we feed the AI. So we did in the last session, we did the Ford Escape. So we're definitely going to do the 2022 Nissan Pathfinder first instead of the Ford Escape. If you want to watch the recorded webinar, I'm going to put this all up on my website, shotgundiagnostics.org. So feel free, if you want to watch the first session and see what we did in that one, we'll absolutely put that up there. So let's go ahead and we're going to do the Nissan Pathfinder. So what you're going to see me do first is the Rabbit AI. Now the Rabbit AI, again, is a physical hardware device. So I'm going to talk to the Rabbit and read it the exact prompt. And then we're going to take that exact prompt and put it into the other two AIs. And we're going to kind of look at and compare the responses. Beta Rabbit. I have a 2022 Nissan Pathfinder 3.5 liter engine with all-wheel drive. I would like detailed written instructions on how to change the transmission fluid. So once I do that, it's going to go do its research and it's going to formulate an answer. So I'm going to show you, we're going to switch over to one of the other AIs here. I'm going to copy the prompt. We're going to do the Carvis AI. And we're going to do that while the Rabbit one is thinking. So we're going to scroll down and we're going to build our vehicle. Now remember, the Carvis AI is specifically designed. It's asking me filtering questions. So we'll have to answer its filtering questions here in just a moment. But the Carvis AI is specifically designed as an automotive-facing AI. So I think it'll be interesting for you to see the comparison here in the responses versus what you would get from the non-automotive specific AIs. All right, so we're going to launch it. And then we are going to dump the prompt in exactly as we just did to the Rabbit. So now I'm going to look at the Rabbit and see what it says. So the Rabbit is asking me, I need to confirm details for accurate instructions. Do you have any specific preferences or requirements for the instructions? Do you need information on the tools required? We're just going to say, we want comprehensive instructions. Beta Rabbit, please provide comprehensive instructions. So we'll see if it can come up with the right information. All right, so here's the Carvis AI. Let's see what it shows us. Okay, it's warning us about potential drawbacks of not changing the fluid, which that's true. Tools needed. Here's our general stuff. Pretty generic, right? Does not seem to be a vehicle-specific recommendation. Here's our steps. You can see this appears to be fairly DIY-oriented. Talking about using jacks and jack stands. They're telling us to take the transmission pan off. So we're going to go look in the service information after we've done this. And we're going to review and see whether or not this information is truly accurate and or detailed in any way, shape, or form relative to the vehicle. But these are quite obviously highly generic instructions, right? Despite the fact that this is supposed to be an automotive-specific resource, it appears to be extremely vague and not very descriptive. They're telling us it's Matic S fluid. So we're going to go check that in the service information. But we're going to switch over to the Rabbit's response, and we're going to show you what the Rabbit came up with after we said we wanted a comprehensive response. So here is the response from the Rabbit. So here's it's cautioning us and telling us that it is in fact generic or general. Here are some specific or some tools it's telling us, which look pretty similar to the Carvis AI. Preparations. They want us to drain the fluid when it's warm. Okay, that's probably a good idea, right? Lifting the vehicle, draining the old fluid. Drain plug. Okay, so at least this one is mentioning a drain plug. This one is not telling us to remove a transmission pan. This one is telling us to remove a drain plug. So we're going to go look in the service information after we run this through ChatGPT and see what it says. Refilling the fluid. Okay. Checking fluid level. Oh, look, it's even telling us shift through all the gears to circulate the new fluid. So this one seems to be a pretty good recommendation. Still generic, but certainly more comprehensive and more detailed than the Carvis AI gave us, which is surprising considering the Rabbit is not an automotive specific GPT or AI. So now we're going to go over to ChatGPT. When you use ChatGPT Premium, you click on the top left corner where it says ChatGPT. And now we're going to paste the exact same prompt into here and see what it gives us. Okay. All right. So this is telling us, okay, drain the old fluid. Okay. So this one's also saying a drain plug. Not taking the pan off, right? Removing the fluid pan. Oh, now it's telling us to take the pan off. Replace the filter. Well, why would we take the pan off if it doesn't have a filter under there, right? So we can see again, this is lacking some vehicle specific information, which again, we don't know what resources the AIs are tapping. So we have no idea how accurate or vehicle specific any of this information being provided is. I think one of the concerning elements here is that if we look at one that is supposed to be, this is a vehicle specific GPT or AI, it's fascinating to me that despite the fact that this is supposed to be vehicle specific, the instructions it provides is not seemingly very vehicle specific. So now let's go over to all data and we're going to go ahead and build the vehicle and actually find out what the instructions say, just to make kind of a comparison to see how accurate the information was. All right, Pathfinder 4-wheel drive. Okay, yep. And mission fluid. All right, service and repair. AT fluid replacement. Okie dokie. So here's what we've seen. Okay, so it wants us to monitor the fluid temp, get it between a certain range, lift up the vehicle, remove the drain plug. Okay, well, that's at least specific. Here's the picture of where the drain plug is located. And then there's also a fill plug. Okay, so that's pretty consistent with what ChatGPT suggested. It said there was a drain plug or a fill plug. Now, I don't see any mention of taking the pan off. Now, we can also go look and see if there is a filter. Here is the fluid capacity here, which I don't recall it saying anything about capacity in the service information, or excuse me, in the GPT or AI responses. And it tells us how to fill the fluid. It also tells us we should be shifting through the various positions. Now, that was mentioned by one of the AIs, so that's certainly good. And it also says we need to check the fluid between a certain temperature range, right? The same temperature range it wants us to have it at before we drain it out. So there we go. So now let's see if there is a filter replacement procedure. It's interesting that the AIs just came up with a comprehensive, hey, do the fluid and the filter in one, right? See if we've got one there. Service and repair. Well, I don't see anything like that. Let's see if there's anything else. Diagrams. AC circuits. Let's see if we have anything else related to this. Fluid warmer, fluid cooler, TCM exploded view. Maybe in the TCM exploded view, I believe these are internal. Nope, they are not internal. I was wrong. let's see if we have anything else potentially related to the valve body, maybe. So it's on the side, so not going to be where the fluid or where the filter would be then. Oil pan, there we go. Loaded view. Is there? Oh, it gives us the same view. So no, it really doesn't look like there is a serviceable filter on this transmission. So again, kind of interesting. The different AIs suggested that we would be removing a pan, and it appears that that is indeed not the case. It's literally just a drain and a fill plug. So that's kind of fascinating, right? Not particularly accurate or helpful if we're trying to get it assistance from the AI here. So let's go back to our prompts and let's see what happens with some of these other ones. So we're back on our prompts. Let's try this one. We're going to try, this is a good one because if you know this vehicle, you know that this is, let's just say, a not so simple repair. If you're in the northern half of the United States or Canada, there's a lot of issues you'll run into on the passenger side axle shaft with removal in a lot of cases, as there is a kind of a bearing bracket or intermediate bracket that the axle passes through that can be quite a bit pain in the butt to remove. And we'll see if any of the AIs make any mention of this or explain or include any knowledge of the existence of this bracket. So first we're going to do the rabbit. Uh-oh. Now it is saying it disconnected from the internet, so we'll see if we can get it. There we go. Beta Rabbit. I have a 2015 Nissan Altima 2.5 liter engine. I would like detailed written instructions on how to replace the passenger front right side axle shaft. All right, so we're going to let it do that. We're going to copy this, and we're going to go over to the Carvis AI. And we're going to enter in the vehicle details. And Altima in 2015. It's for 100,000. And we will put in that. And now we are going to dump the same prompt we gave the rabbit in, see what it says. Okay, so it's giving us fairly generic information again. Interesting. Oh, there's a funny one. Okay, folks, so I don't know how familiar you are with that particular brand, but that is definitely not a brand I would be recommending from my personal experience. I do find that pretty hilarious that that is unsolicited recommendations of a specific brand of equipment. Again, I'm not really sure if this particular AI program is taking money from any of these companies to recommend their products or what the rationale is here. But it's pretty questionable to me that an AI would be making any recommendations of any kind about specific brands, considering A, it doesn't have the ability to experience good or bad as far as quality of products, and B, any human building an AI implicitly may have interests that are being driven by something other than giving the best advice, right? So this could be something where it's literally doing this because the people in charge said, oh, Cardone said, hey, we'll pay you to have your AI recommend our parts during the course of a repair. I don't know about you, but that seems highly questionable to be doing something like that. I guess we could say that's the penetration of sponsored content, right? Lots and lots of people making recommendations of specific stuff strictly because someone paid them or gave them something for free. I think that's highly questionable. And if we look at some of the other recommendations we saw in session one, where the specific tools it was recommending were not even like high quality tools that most people would ever think is the right tools to use. Certainly, if you polled thousands of technicians, I think the majority of them would agree that recommending that brand of an axle shaft is extremely questionable. So again, we have to ask why, right? Why is an AI making this recommendation to us? So again, always something that has to run through our heads when we are looking at this information. So now let's switch over. The rabbit has done its little research and we're going to see what it comes up with here. So we'll switch to the rabbit. Whoop, that's the Pathfinder. Whoop, that's a different one. I better refresh again. Uh-oh, did it not pull the information? Oh, please provide the written guide and the video references. So basically it came back with an additional question that I failed to catch. So we'll switch over to ChatGPT while the rabbit is doing that. And we'll make a new GPT here. And we're going to put in our prompt. And we're going to see what it comes back with. Interesting. So it looks like it gave us a little bit longer tools list. And it's interesting. It's actually injecting almost like some opinion or like maybe something that would be more experiential based, right? An axle puller tool, optional but helpful. Axle nut socket, likely this size, but verify. Interesting. Transmission fluid. Well, if you take out an axle shaft, you could lose fluid, right? That is a potential possibility. So let's look at what our instructions say. Okay, removing the axle, break the bar, axle knocket, drain transmission fluid if necessary. So if the output or the half shaft is potentially into the case and maybe going to cause leakage, maybe we're draining the fluid, detaching the brake caliper and rotor, disconnect the strut from the steering knuckle so you can swing everything out, separating the axle from the hub, separating the axle from. So again, there's no mention of that specific intermediate bracket that I mentioned, and we'll show you in the service information so you can see here. So again, it's relatively generic. There's a little bit more injection of recommendation here from ChatGPT, but again, not what I would qualify as super helpful. Let's go back to the rabbit here, and we'll see what the rabbit came up with after it did its little refinement. Okay, so here we go. So there are some video tutorials, it says, and here's the written instructions. Written instructions: ensure the car is on a flat surface. Okay, lifting the vehicle, removing the wheel, removing the axle nut, disconnecting suspension components. Okay, brake caliper, brake rotor, sway bar link, lower ball joint. Interesting. Removing the axle. Okay, again, not making any mention of the intermediate bracket that we'll show you. New axle with transmission, blah de blah. So, and then it gives a bunch of reference videos here. So that's probably helpful, right? Oh, look, here's some images. Interesting. Let's try opening those up and see what it gave us. Oh, that's funny. So it gave us a picture of an axle shaft. This is a picture of obviously the initial screen of the video on one video. And here's another one. Interesting. So really, really interesting what reference images it gave us. Let's go look at the service information procedure. We're going to go back and we're going to change to our vehicle. And we said this was a 15 Altima. Whoops. So we're going to put that in here. 15 Nissan Altima sedan 2.5. All right. We'll type in axle, shaft, and we'll search. All right. Disassembly, removal, and installation. There we go. Right front drive shaft. Okay. So here's our written instructions. Now it's interesting to me because it does not make mention of the bracket. Now, what if we go and we look at the exploded view? Oh, that's not what we want. Go back. Back. Service precautions, front axle. See this bracket right here, too. These are sometimes very challenging to remove the axle shaft from in the land of corrosion. And we noticed that none of the instructions we got from the AIs mentioned this. None of them pointed out that that was potentially going to be a roadblock or be difficult. They made it sound very cut and dry, the way it is on a large number of vehicles. So it doesn't appear that there is any ability to account for individual nuances to vehicles, at least present in the current models, including in the model that we used that was specific to this particular vehicle, right? We input the vehicle characteristics, we asked it the exact same question, and it still did not give us any specific notes about this vehicle application. So it's fascinating to see that the AIs, even the ones that appear to be specifically for vehicles, do not appear to account for individual information. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why is that happening, right? It's all based off of the information resources each individual AI has access to. Now, there are federal regulations in certain countries that block the AIs from having unlimited access to internet resources and things of that nature. As pointed out in our first session webinar, James pointed out that there are questions about copyright and essentially giving the access to the AI to information that is subject to copyright. That's a huge possibility and concern. Now, one of the things that's fascinating is, for instance, the Rabbit AI has discussed the possibility of making it so you could give the Rabbit your credentials to log into a given information website. So, for instance, if we could give the Rabbit our credentials to log into all data, and then we said, Rabbit, go search all data for blank, if it could parse that information and pull that information up for us, that could be a tremendous time saving. So if you said, hey, I'm sitting in the car and I'm doing the initial pre-scan of the vehicle, but I know that I've already got these jobs sold on this vehicle, you could say, Rabbit, go into all data and pull the procedures for doing blank, blank, and blank, and email those to me in a PDF or pull those up on my desktop computer. If you could ask the AI to go do that work for you while you're doing other tasks, that could be a tremendous time savings. So, very interesting to see just how lack of vehicle context specific some of these AIs are presented. Now, the ones that are not automotive specific doesn't really surprise me that they don't seem to be accounting for individual nuances of a given specific vehicle. But it does surprise me that the one that is automotive specific does not provide a greater level of detail or information. That is interesting. Now, again, that is likely due to whatever specific source material that they are providing to the AI. If they were to license all of the vehicle manufacturer OEM data and feed it to the AI, we would likely get a sophisticated level search engine similar to what we would expect out of something like AllData, Identifix, or Mitchell, or any other service information resource. So let's try another one of our prompts. Now, if you have a prompt you'd like me to try, just go ahead and type it in the chat there, and we will give it a shot. I want to try this one because this is an interesting one. If you have ever run across and done vehicle programming, you will see, excuse me, you have to disable on push button start vehicles. They like to go back to sleep while you are attempting to do various tasks. So being able to disable that sleep mode, if you will, can be an absolutely vital step. So I want to see if the AI can tell us how to defeat this on a given specific vehicle. Now, I have sort of cheated, and I happen to know that there is specifically a procedure written for this exact scenario. I want to see if the AI has the ability to give us any insightful information on this procedure or not. So we're going to take this, and I'm going to ask the Rabbit AI, and then we're going to do one of the other ones while it's thinking. Beta Rabbit, I have a 2016 Nissan Altima 2.5-liter engine. I would like to know how to disable the automatic power down of the vehicle for the purposes of performing module programming. Now, again, how I ask this question may affect the outcomes that the AI brings. But we're going to copy that information, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump over to the Carvis AI, and we'll test this one. Now, we said it's a 2016 Nissan Altima. All right, Altima 2016. I'll just say 100,000. Say 07, 2024. Launch. Oh, the Rabbit wants me to give it more information. I would like specific instructions to prevent the vehicle from switching off the ignition. So we're giving it some specific clarification there because it wasn't sure. So we're going to say this and see what the Carvis AI has to say. Okay, so this appears to be a little bit more on point. Look at this. This is interesting. This one is a little bit more detailed, right? So this time it's telling us about Consult 3 plus diagnostic scanner. Now that's the factory software. It's not mentioning the right to repair version, which is the version that the aftermarket typically purchases or has access to. So it's saying we're going to connect the tool, we're going to turn on the ignition without starting the engine, and we are going to launch the Consult 3 Plus software on the laptop, blah, blah, blah. Go to the BCM, work support, power save mode off. Now I can tell you that this is in fact one way to do this action. There is also a way to disable power save mode without using the scan tool in most cases. So we're going to go in the service information after this, but let's see what we got from the Rabbit. Now that is definitely not an applicable video. Acceleration problems. No power in drive or reverse. Again, also completely not applicable. So swing and a miss on the videos. We're kind of in the neighborhood here with this other response though, so not too bad. All right, let's go over to ChatGPT and see what that has to say. So we're going to switch to ChatGPT and we'll make a new one, and we're going to say boom, boom. And let's see what this says. Hey, look at that. Tells us to turn on a battery maintainer. Well, that's good. This AI is better about doing things the right way than some technicians are. All right, so ignition on. Connect OBD tool, scan tool, blah, blah. Okay, so it's suggesting that the setting might be in the BCM and then disabling it via the scan tool. Okay, so that's interesting, right? Consulting the service manual, etc. So again, pretty similar. It's not mentioning Consult 3 here, but it is essentially saying that the scan tool should be able to perform this function potentially, right? Let's see what the Rabbit had to say. Oh, it came up empty. So the Rabbit couldn't find the information and was unable to give us instructions. Basically, you won't be able to see it on the screen, but essentially it said, I can't figure it out. So Rabbit comes up empty. ChatGPT is fairly generic in nature, but definitely suggests the scan tool could be involved and potentially accomplish this. And the Carvus AI was a little bit more specific, suggesting that maybe with the Console 3 factory software, we would be able to do this. So let's go into the service information manual and see if there is anything that would suggest that this is a possible procedure we can do without that. Now, again, I cheated. I sort of knew that this was a procedure that exists, and I was just curious if the AI could give us this information. So build the vehicle. So what did we say exactly? We'll just say what was our initial search term, right? We said the search term was, if I'm checking here, automatic power down. We'll just say automatic power down. See if that comes up with anything. Oh, look at that. Console function. Interesting. So maybe we've got something here in the BCM. Let's see what this comes up with. Look at that. Accessory battery saver stop. So it does indeed look like there is a function in the tool, battery saver. Check to see if this is on or off. So clearly it looks like this is something we can switch on or off specifically with the software for the purposes of programming. So we could disable it when we want to do programming and then re-enable it after we are done with programming. Now, again, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I happen to know that there is a written procedure to do this without the scan tool. And if we search, I'll show you here. Okay, if my mouse will work. There we go. All right, there we go. Oh, boy. Really not cooperating. Ignition battery saver. Let's go and type saver. Procedure for temporarily disabling ignition battery saver system. We want the work procedure. Here we go. Look at that. There is a written procedure to do this without the scan tool. Now, again, I cheated because I've already done this research and I happen to know that this exists. The AI was able to tell us that there was for sure, one of the AIs, I should say, said that we could do this with Console 3 software, which makes sense. The factory scan tool having this as a function is cool and probably somewhat predictable. There's a written procedure to do it without that, and none of the AIs showed any recognition or knowledge of that. Again, they don't have access to the factory service information. If they had a login for All Data or Mitchell or Identifix and could parse that factory service information and potentially pull that out, we could have asked it a question like this, and maybe it would have given us the written procedure to do it both with and without the scan tool. So again, hopefully you find this information kind of interesting to be able to see just the differences in what the results are as far as what we get back, right? Clearly some very different responses. We got one AI that was aware that Console 3 could do this, and it even told us to go to the right place, right? In the BCM, there is a function, right? And that's correct because the service information agrees with that. Now, there's a written procedure like we see here that lets us do that without the scan tool, which is more convenient in a lot of situations. We don't know if an aftermarket scan tool could do this. In many cases, it probably will, right? Generally speaking, they're reverse engineered from the OE, so they probably will have this function. Now, whether or not the function actually works, hard to say, right? But knowing that there's a way to do this without the scan tool is extremely vital. Now, that's where I see potential if we can get an AI like this that could log into a factory service information website or log into an aftermarket service information website and essentially act as an enhanced search engine, how much more valuable that could be to the daily technician's operations if it had the ability to go research for you while you were doing other tasks. Because if you think about today's vehicles, how many more times we have to do research to understand how a system works and be able to concretely determine how something is functioning, what it's supposed to do, even finding wiring diagrams. If you were able to essentially turn the AI loose and said, go find me all the wiring diagrams, hey, Rabbit, go find me all the wiring diagrams for blah, blah, whatever, and you told it to go search in all data Mitchell Identifix, and it could do that, that would be great, right? Because then you could go over to the computer, and if it was halfway reliable, you'd be able to cut a bunch of time off of your operation. So let's try a diagnostic prompt and see if it's any good at that. Now, we did this in the first session as well, but we're going to go ahead and do it again in this one. So now we're going to try a diagnostics prompt, and I'm going to do it specifically on this Volkswagen because I think this is a very interesting one to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is do it with the Rabbit. Now, the Rabbit has been asked this question before, so it's possible that its responses will be better than it were the first time I asked the question. Now, I don't know that, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to try it. So we'll wake it up. Beta Rabbit. I have a 2016 Volkswagen Golf 2.0 liter turbo. I have a fault code of P2004 stored in the engine control module. What troubleshooting steps are recommended based off all available resources? Now it's going to do its little dance. We'll let it do its search and research. And we're going to go over here and we are going to switch to the Carvis AI. And we're going to use a Golf. And it is a 2016. And we'll just say 100,000 miles. And 07, 2024. And boom, launch. And we're going to give it the exact same prompt we just read to the Rabbit. All right. So right out of the gate, it's looking relatively generic in nature. Telling us to do resistance checks, which, you know, if you're an experienced and seasoned diagnostic technician, you're well aware that that's usually a waste of time. And you can see that it is telling us at least what the source is that it came up with this information. We're also going to try asking it some filtering questions. If it comes up with any YouTube searches, we'll see what it comes up with there as well. Probably not going to come up with much. I believe the last time I tried this, it had no videos that it came up with. Now, it really seems to make a big difference how we ask the question. So there's a filtering question we're going to ask after we're done letting it do its YouTube search. And we're going to see if it can come up with any additional resources based off of that. Now, we'll go ahead and switch. It doesn't look like it's coming up with anything on YouTube. I'll go back and recheck in a second here. So we're going to switch over to the Rabbit, and we're going to refresh. And here is the Rabbit. All right, so the Rabbit gives us, indicates an issue with the intake manifold runner control being stuck, open, okay? So it seems to have some directional recognition of what this code means. So it's telling us to inspect the actuator, check the wiring and connectors, test the solenoid, the control solenoid, checking vacuum supply, inspecting the manifold, carbon buildup, sticking, cleaning the manifold, removing carbon, replacing the manifold potentially, performing an adaptation reset. So it's suggesting that there may be a procedure required with the scan tool after we do the repair. And then clearing the fault codes and seeing the fault codes come back. And look, it also gives us some potential cited information. You notice it's using owners' forums as sources. Now, again, we talked about how much veracity is the information that's being provided, right? We have to ask ourselves, is an owner's forum really a reputable source of information? Pretty debatable, right? As professional technicians, we know that that is highly questionable. Sometimes owners' forums can be insightful. Sometimes they can be completely misleading and a total waste of time. We're not qualifying the information as far as whether or not it has actual accuracy or validity. That could be a tremendous problem if we're basing any conclusions or decision making off of it, right? So we need to be aware of those limitations. Again, garbage in, garbage out. Now, it doesn't seem like anything written here is particularly misleading or inaccurate. And the Carvis AI came up with nothing specific for videos. And the source that it cited was pretty vague and not necessarily, again, a source that we would necessarily want to trust or base our decision making off of. So let's do ChatGPT now. We're going to paste the same prompt. We're going to see what it comes up with. So again, it provides recognition that it thinks the fault code means it's stuck open. Okay. It tells us we should check for other codes first. That's good advice, right? Checking to see if the actuator is jammed or damaged. Checking wiring connectors. Actuator test. See if it's able to move essentially. Electrical test, again, telling us for voltage and continuity, so a little more dicey there, right? Vacuum lines, okay, it tells us to check vacuum lines. That makes some logical sense if it's a vacuum actuated system. Scan tool diagnostics, maybe an active bidirectional test. Okay, it's generic in nature, but it's not bad advice, right? Manifold inspection, carbon buildup or debris causing it to stick open. Replace faulty components, clearing the code and test driving, updating software maybe. Okay, maybe. Okay, so again, relatively generic, not necessarily bad advice, probably some accurate basic steps here, but nothing that's super context specific. Now, what about if we upload some documents directly? Do we have the ability to give ChatGPT specific information? So we're going to give it two specific pieces of information. A training manual that describes the total operation of the intake manifold and how it works, and a TSB that includes the specific fault code and applies to this vehicle. Based on these included documents, please revise the test plan accordingly to provide greater detail and vehicle specific accuracy. All right, let's see what it says after it parses those documents. Hey, look at that. It's mentioning Volkswagen specific lingo, ETKA, which is the factory parts database. Okay, that's probably good. Checking for restrictions or blockages in the vacuum lines. Oh, look, specifically citing a measured value block with the scan tool, which is written in one of the documents we uploaded. Procedure 2, inspection of the flap. Okay, engine cover. Again, this is all lingo that's specifically in the bulletin. We can't run the adaptation. It tells us to replace. Actuator test, electrical test. Now, these are still generic. This is still generic, and there are no specifications in the service information. There may be in a factory test plan in Otis, but it makes no mention of that. Intake manifold inspection, replace faulty components. So some variability here, some additional information pulled from the documentation. Here's some other stuff it tells us to do. So a little bit more outlined and detailed based off of the TSB that we fed it. Now, maybe we want to look at the TSB directly just so you can see if we can pull that up here. Here is the bulletin, so you can see it. Whoops, sorry. So at least A, the definition was correct, right? Stuck closed. Here's some other information. So here's the 2 inspections before replacing the manifold. So they're already jumping to, you're probably going to replace the manifold. Now here, it's telling us we need to check intake manifold flap. So there's a little piece right here it's asking us to look at to see if it's broken or disconnected. It also says, look, there's a revised manifold. Now, we didn't see any mention of that by the AI. So no mention that, hey, there's a revision. No mention that maybe we should be checking to see if there is a superseded part number. It did regurgitate the majority of this information here. So again, not without some merit or some value, but clearly it still left out some vital information, right? It still didn't make mention of, hey, there might be a revised part available and we want to know. So let's go and see if we can ask it. We'll go back to ChatGPT. Are there revised intake manifolds available for this vehicle? Oh, look. So it actually cited the document. Look at that. And it pulls the part numbers out. So again, we can't necessarily trust that the AI is going to give us all the information, even when provided with the correct source material. So we fed it specific source material for this exact vehicle and this exact situation, and it still didn't make mention of some of this stuff unless we directly asked for it. So again, I think this illustrates that we have to be conscious of, despite the fact that this may have value and it may have some level of utility, there's still some serious limitations. We have to keep our critical thinking cap on, and we have to know that we are responsible for asking the appropriate questions, regardless of what the AI has access to, regardless of if the AI has specific instructions to give us comprehensive troubleshooting or whatever it may be. We know that it's still limited in its ability to deliver accurate and comprehensive information, taking into account all possibilities. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to email me, hawken@shotgundiagnostics.org. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about the webinar. Again, I'm going to post this up on the website, so if you know people who would like to watch it who did not attend today, obviously we got far lower attendance than I was hoping for, but again, we're going to post the video, so hopefully some more people will watch this and kind of see and get some eye-opening that takes place. I really appreciate every one of you who took the time to attend. And again, I'm really interested in your feedback if there are ways that we can offer some other webinars in the future that you would enjoy. And, appreciate any feedback for ideas for other new webinars that we could do that would help you, topics you want to explore, future technologies, things of that nature. So thanks again for coming. We're going to wrap up the webinar now. So we'll see you next time.